So I'm closing the session, and as you heard, UDI was the core of the topic for today, and we didn't discuss so much about the GS1 standards and how they are used to support this implementation. So let's look now at the tool to make all this work. First, the benefits of UDI, and here I'm really putting myself in the shoes of the healthcare providers, because ultimately, if we have UDI regulation in place today, if they are implemented so carefully by the manufacturers, it's to improve patient safety. And so the benefits of UDI, it's not an exhaustive list, but definitely to make sure that you identify your device uniquely and globally, to facilitate all the market surveillance measures and the corrective measures to be taken in case a device is dangerous or defectious. The possibility to marry the device with the data, in particular related to medical health records. And then, of course, the possibility to optimize all the supply chain and all the management in hospital. And if you think back of all the things we've seen over the last year and COVID, in particular, the possibility to make sure that you know what are the devices available in a country or in a hospital, and that you are able to make sure that you're using the right device to treat the right patient, and that this device is safe and efficient. So GS1 and UDI, where is it coming from? What's the relationship? As you can see on the screen, for Europe, we are one of the issuing entity, meaning that the European Commission, based on recommendation that other member states and other countries have followed, has decided to accredit a few standard development organizations across the world in order to be able to assign unique device identifiers based on their regulation. It's a case in the US since many years. It's a case in Europe since 2019. It's also the case in Saudi Arabia. It's a case in South Korea, in Turkey, in Singapore, in China, and in many other countries that are coming next. We have within GS1 not only a piece of paper saying that we are a designated issuing entity, we have also threatened the relationship with the European Commission to make sure that we are really seen as a partner, and that we work with them as part of different work groups, also to ensure the consistency of the requirement with the GS1 system. And you see here two examples of the work group we are part of: the medical device coordination group for UDI and the one for EUDAMED. That was the introduction, and now let's dig into the UDI system. So the UDI system, as defined by the European Commission for Europe, but also based on the definition of the system by the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, is divided into three parts. The blue part here on the slide is the identifier. It has to be globally unique, and it's divided in two components for Europe. You have the basic UDI, which is very special to Europe. None of the countries so far have decided to go for that concept. And then the UDI itself. That UDI must, and the PIs must be captured both in automatic format and in human readable format. And last but not least, you need to report data elements in the UDI database, which is called EUDAMED for Europe. And these three components, if you draw the parallel with the way we describe the GS1 system, fits perfectly into the GS1 system with these identifiers. So identify your product uniquely and globally across the world, capture that information in a machine readable format, and then also exchange that information, in that case, with the regulator, but also with your supply chain partners. So identify, capture, share is really exactly the same idea behind the GS1 system and the UDI system. If I dig now one step further into the blue part of the UDI system and the identifiers, if I translate the regulatory requirements, which are here on the right, into the GS1 standard, I start with the highest level identifier, which is this basic UDI-DI. The basic UDI-DI is a new level of identification, and it's only for Europe, I repeat it. And it's aiming at identifying a group of devices. And you have here on the slide a picture which will help you to visualize. So these are the same devices. They share the common clinical specification and characteristic, and they can be identified for pre-market approval and for all this procedure in the same way. They can also be grouped together as part of EUDAMED, and you will see that later. And the idea is to use that identifier really on documentation and in EUDAMED, but not to apply it to the product. So it's a kind of virtual identifier you use to group devices and to identify that group of devices which are part of the same family. In the GS1 system, it's called the GMN, and we have aligned the specifications and the standard with a requirement from the European Commission. And unfortunately, here on the slide, you have a white box. So I will ask you to close your eyes and to imagine that the next part on the left side, so the UDI regulatory requirements, would be the UDI-DI. And the UDI-DI in the GS1 translation is the GTIN. That's the common, the identifier that which is used in GS1 to identify trade item. I saw a question earlier. You need to assign one GTIN to one trade item. And that's really the base, the core principle of the GS1 system, and that's also the core principle of the UDI requirements. And you need to identify every level of packaging for UDI, and you stop when you reach the logistic units. And you go down to the unit of use. The unit of use, DI, does not always have to be marked, but nevertheless, you need to assign a unique identifier to that level. And it's what you see on the little picture here. So the syringe will have a GTIN. You move one packaging level higher, you assign a new GTIN, and then you continue moving and assigning GTINs until you reach your logistic unit where you stop having to implement UDI. It doesn't mean that you don't apply any identification on this level, but at least they are not covered by the UDI requirements. And still on that table, you would have had on the left a part related to the unique identification, the UDI PI, which are the production identifiers. And here the regulation is telling you that you can use what is relevant for patient safety and for traceability. And the usual suspects are lot number, expiry date, manufacturing date, serial number. Be careful, the serial number, contrary to pharma, and I saw a few parallel drawn with the FMD, the serialization is not mandatory for a medical device, so it's not always required to apply a serial number next to your GTIN for medical device. You find it in most of the case for implants. And so at the very bottom of this table, you would have had the GTIN plus the application identifiers that we have in the GS1 system equal the UDI requirements. You will have the table as the slide will be distributed, but that's really in a nutshell the parallel and the translation of the UDI requirement into the GS1 standard, and we support the full implementation of this requirement. I won't go into the details of the specificities for procedure pack or configurable devices, etc., but you have to know that on top of the regulation itself, you have a lot of guidance, and not all of them are already released. For example, I saw also a question on how do you identify orthopedic kits and these kind of things. So these are specifications that the European Commission is currently working on. They are often asking for our views and how the GS1 system could apply for that. And we are helping them, but be careful, make sure that you always try to dig into the more specific requirements when you have to implement. In terms of GS1 implementation, if the regulation is silent or if it's asking you to apply the standards, then you will have to dig into the GS1 GTIN allocation groups. And here it's really with the help of the MO and GS1 UK or any other MO that you will be able to really understand all the details and make sure that you're applying the standards in a correct way and in a harmonized way across the world. And if you do it correctly, then you will really manage to leverage the use of the GS1 at its best, meaning that you will be able to implement one requirement, but it will be duplicated for other similar requirements across the world. If we move to the pink part of the UDI system and the application, I will go quickly here because you saw also in Mark's presentation earlier, in practice, how it works and how these barcodes appear on the packaging. These are examples. You have to keep in mind that the regulation is, let's say, technology neutral, meaning that you don't have a specific type of barcode to apply. It's really any type of barcode as long as they are compliant with ISO standards, and at the case of all the GS1 data carriers. Things to be kept in mind is the fact that you also have, in some cases, requirement for direct part marking. And in that case, the choice is quite limited because for most of these very specific devices, you have space constraints, and so the data matrix will be the preferred option. And because most of them have to go through the sterilization process, then you have to engrave it. So here again, a short limitation in regards to the choice, but nevertheless, it's important to keep in mind, and I repeat it again, that all the packaging level must be identified down to the unit of use. And now I will slow down because the requests from my colleagues were really to dig into EUDAMED. It's not the easiest topic, to be honest, but we are starting to have a few pieces and a few clarifications. So let's see together what are the challenges and where we are today. So first, EUDAMED. EUDAMED is this huge database in Europe. It's not new. They are building up EUDAMED on EUDAMED version 1 and version 2. We are now with version 3. And the idea is really to have a database which is covering the entire life cycle of a device, from the pre-market approval down to the use and the clinical investigations or market surveillance activities. And in the middle of it, you have one part which is related to the registration of the device. And to draw the comparison with the US, because I think it's the one which is the most common system implemented today for UDI, you see here that the UDI database, which has been known as being very challenging to implement, etc., in the US, is only one super small part of the entire EUDAMED database. So it's not for you to panic, but it's for you to keep in mind that EUDAMED is not only UDI, it's much more than that. We have already for the UDI database different pillars that are released. They call it different modules that are released. And the Commission said that they will plan in releasing them one by one. And the idea is that the requirement for registration will really be entering into force and implemented once EUDAMED will be fully functional. And that's the wording you find in the regulation. Lots of discussion happen on what fully functional mean. And so the idea is now that the requirement for EUDAMED and for registration of devices will become applicable in 2024. So it will be mandatory as from 2024. In the meantime, as the Commission will release modules, you will have the possibility to voluntarily register economic operator, devices, certificates in EUDAMED. So the idea is really to have this progressive and gradual release with voluntary registration, and then at one point, the mandatory deadline is coming. So let's look at the pillar or the modules related to device registration. And here is a screenshot from a presentation that the Commission gave in March during the MDCG meeting on EUDAMED. and they were showing what the playground looked like. The playground for this module is open until July this year, and the idea is that after the playground is closed, they will do some cleaning and some improvements, and in September, the module for UDI, so for device registration, will be live. So you'll see here, what is important is that you really have these different modules. So today, the actor registration module is live, and that's a prerequisite. So if you want to register a device, you first must register yourself as one of the actors. And not all type of economic operator are able to register themselves as an actor. You have to be a manufacturer, authorized representative, importer, or a packager of kit and procedure pack. Once you've done so, you receive a number that is randomly generated by EUDAMED, so it's not GS1, called SRN. With this number, you will be able to register your devices. You will also be able to download or upload your certificates and so on and so on. So really, first step, register yourself as an operator. And now we are trying to register ourselves, to start to register devices. So as you can see, you have different roles, and I mentioned it already, and you have the possibility to change your role. And why is this important? It's because depending on who you are, you will have different rights and different possibility to edit the different fields in EUDAMED. The scope, so that's what can you do today as part of the playground. It will not be like that forever. They will, of course, open the scope as the module will be live. But today, what can you do? In regards to device, you can register the devices that are covered by the regulation, as well as legacy devices. And you can also register the procedure, the system and procedure packs. You can also do some searches, and you can do different versioning and add different version and make some change in what you have already registered. So you can also register your certificates. You can also do some search in regards to certificates. And last but not least, you can upload different information related to specific devices, and you can download a few information as well as a certificate. It's not because I'm presenting this as a scope that it means that everything is working well. So this is the goal, and this is what the Commission is aiming at testing. But today, not everything is working perfectly. What are the challenges? So EUDAMED is often seen as a monster, to be honest, and the Commission is often struggling to deliver. We had many delays, one of them due to COVID, but other due to the fact that it was difficult for the Commission to be able to take on board all the testing, manage all the environment, etc. So as I said, compared to the good idea, for example, EUDAMED is a house with different pillars, with different pieces, potentially the possibility for the data to communicate across the different pillars, etc. The objectives are different. So part of EUDAMED is related to the pre-market authorization. Another one is related to purely data device identification. Another one is more intended to make sure that we have the proper follow-up and vigilance in regards to the device. The users are different, and it's all based on regulation. So what are the advice and what we have seen so far? The advice from the Commission is to make sure you have the correct access profile and you have been approved as one of the users. So the first step to register yourself. Second is to check all the documentation which is available. So as I said, for the identification part before, you have plenty of guidance depending on the type of device you want to identify. It's the same for EUDAMED. They have a web page dedicated to EUDAMED where you find different documentation and a possibility to help and really test also all your files And you have the possibility to see online different examples of XML messages. Status. So what we have, again, as advice from the Commission, not really from GS1, because we are issuing an entity for the identifiers, but in principle, we have nothing to do with EUDAMED. Focus on the minimal legal requirement. They call it the minimum viable product. So really don't try to put everything in there as a first shoot. Just go first with what is required, and then you extend it afterwards when you know it's working. Provide feedback to the Commission in order for them to be able to improve the system. And here I will open a parenthesis because we received a lot of feedback from users saying there is a mistake in EUDAMED, meaning that on the UDI field, there is a possibility to enter different size of GTINs. So you could have a GTINs with 14 digits, 12 digits, 13 digits, it would work. And so you could identify the same device with 3 different types of GTINs, because in principle, the recommendation we have given based on the experience we had with the other database in other jurisdiction was to always go for a GTIN in a 14-digit format, adding zeros at the beginning. By not taking it into account and by allowing the possibility to have different size of GTINs, so different lengths of GTINs, the Commission was then allowing the possibility to register the same device with different GTINs. And so we asked them to correct that, and we just got the confirmation that it's taken into account. So they are doing constant review and constant update in EUDAMED. Make sure that you provide that feedback, how to do it. Either you go on the EUDAMED website and you have this email address where you can send email and you share your feedback. If you are part of MedTech Europe, Catalin is often asking for feedback and also sharing updates and information from the Commission. Or you can also knock at the door of GS1 UK or GS1 Global Office, and we will also forward this information to the Commission. But do it, because it's still open for testing and the playground is still open. Once it will be closed and everything will be live, it will be much more difficult to change it. Talking about deadlines and when things will be live. So the first, let's say the first wave of development was related to this actor, certificate and device modules. And for that one, the playground for the device module is open until July, and then production will be going on, and the release is planned for end of September. Then they will start to develop the rest of the EUDAMED modules related to the different documentation for vigilance. And this will start after summer, so in September as well this year. We don't know yet when it will be open for playground and when it will be launched for use. And then you have all the other requirements that are related to the post-market surveillance and to this, how do you use it concretely and who has access, etc., for which we still have no visibility. When I did this slide deck, I didn't have all the information related to master UDI. So I did this time frame, and you saw this time frame already many times, either as a pyramid or as a table. So this time it's an arrow with bubbles. So nothing new in there, but I will share with you verbally the update that we have in regards to the master UDI. So first of all, the master UDI is a new level of identification for Europe. So you would have your basic UDI, which is not on the packaging and which is aiming at identifying a family of devices for documentation and for EUDAMED. You will have your UDI, which is your GTIN, which is on the product and identifying every trade item. And you will have one level between, which will be the master UDI, which will also be on the packaging and grouping devices with a large volume of individualization. And so a large volume of records in EUDAMED, if they would have had to be registered in EUDAMED at the GTIN level. And in particular, the Commission has targeted eyewear product, so contact lens, spectacular frame, spectacular lens, saying for these devices, we don't want you to register all GTINs in EUDAMED because you have different diameters, different shape, different size, different optical strengths, and so we will end up with too many records and EUDAMED will explode. They are also targeting other type of products in the future, such as sutures, catheters, etc., or orthopedic screws, all these kind of devices. They will start with eyewear product, and the idea is that a new standard is developed by the issuing entities. We are still waiting for the work request. We are still waiting for the clinical for the specification from the Commission, etc. It should be ready for September. So when the UDI registration module is out, this is already a possibility, and it's already planned in there. In waiting for all that to happen, the Commission just released a few weeks ago a new guidance. It's a policy paper actually, and they are saying that for eyewear product, they should move ahead, with the deadlines for assignment and labeling of the devices. However, they are not allowed to use the possibility for voluntary registration in EUDAMED. In waiting for all the things in EUDAMED to be fixed, they must wait for really the last deadline when it's mandatory to register the devices in EUDAMED. So that's an update on the time frame. If you are a manufacturer of eyewear product, keep your eyes open. We will need you to develop the standards with a very, very fast track, and don't register anything in EUDAMED until the last mandatory deadline of today, 2024, because things will be changing. And to close, so what do you do when you receive regulation with UDI and you need to implement? So you already had good tips from the previous speakers, and this is really just a high-level checklist. And if you knock at the door of any of the GS1 MOs, they will be able to help you. So assess the product and see whether they are falling or not under the scope. Assess the class for each product, because it will also define the deadline. Select or define your issuing agency. Contact GS1 UK or any other MO so they can help you to assign the company prefix, to implement the different identifiers, etc. And assign them to the product, register everything in EUDAMED, barcode the product, and make sure that you have the right system for the maintenance of the data. That's the order which is in the regulation. And if I have to give you an advice, start with data, because it's often where you will need a lot of time to clean your data, to make sure that you have the right understanding of the definition, to make sure that you understand how EUDAMED is working, because as you saw, it's still under progress, even if the deadline is the release is in September. So don't underestimate that part, and again, just ask for support to GS1. Rest of the world, so this is a map which is changing very often. The last little tick was for Singapore, because we just got their requirements. And you see Australia, TGA launched a series of webinars on UDI, so it's not a very user-friendly time zone for us, but nevertheless very interesting. They are looking at the basic UDI idea as well for Australia. Brazil is also working on draft requirements, and you have the usual suspects where things are already running and implemented, but make sure that you have that map in mind, and that you see also, you leverage also the benefits of using a system of standards which is global, when the requirements are truly global as well. And I see we are running short in time, but this was just a slide to make it even more relevant after the year we all had to go through, and to really mention again that ultimately it's standards are needed to help and to make sure that patients are safe. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Géraldine, for the presentation and for the clarity on UDI and GS1 standards and what has been described as a monster, the really useful information on EUDAMED. So thank you very much. Have we got time for one quick question, Chris?
I think so. Right, okay. Can a UK manufacturer register themselves in EUDAMED, or do we need a EU rep to do this?
I don't know, to be honest. No, I mean, we've been working a lot in clarifying the requirements related to the CE mark, for example, and how it will work with the UK CA mark. But on that one, I don't know. So you have an help desk and a web page. I'm happy to note the question down and to come back to you with a response, but I don't know.
Thank you, Géraldine. There are quite a few other questions as well. Just to reiterate that we have the panel Q&A session coming up on the 29th of June. So we'll share these questions with Géraldine in advance, and hopefully she'll have answers to at least a few of them.